Hello everyone. Today we got something special for y'all. We got a primary weapon tier list for Helldivers 2. Just as a disclaimer, I am going through this with the mindset of talking about each weapon as they fit into their own role or niche. This isn't necessarily, which ones are my favorite or which ones I think are the best. This is just which ones I think fit into their own role and how good I think that role is or fits into the game. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First off, we have the Knight submachine gun, one of my personal favorites. However, in terms of this tier list, we're going to go ahead and slot this one into A. I think that this one is basically just a juiced up secondary, and I think that because of that, it functions really well with more of the add clear style support weapons. For example, the autocannon. I think that this one pairs up super well with the autocannon because when you have the autocannon, you're mostly using that one to clear adds anyway because it has so much ammo, and because of that, you can take the knight or pair the knight with it. That way, whenever something gets up close, you just pull out the knight and you can even just gun them down while you're kind of running away. The only downside to the knight is its recoil, so if you are just running away, you are going to have to adjust for the recoil pretty heavily. And because of that recoil, it can struggle with ammo. You know, a lot of times with the recoil, you end up wasting a lot of bullets because they just go flying upward above all of the enemies. But overall, in my opinion, a good weapon that has a good role in the game. So we're going to move on to the next one, which is the Plasma Purifier. And this one we're going to go ahead and slot into C tier here because it just doesn't really have its own role yet. I don't think this one's functioning as intended yet because there's a lack of response whenever you hit something with a direct impact, as well as it does the same damage as the Punisher Plasma. I think it has a little bit higher stagger, but there's just not really a reason to use this over the Punisher Plasma because there's not any more damage, and you have the downside of the charge up time. So this one's going to go down in the C tier. Next up, we have the Diligence, the regular variant. This one is a good marksman rifle. Does everything you want a marksman rifle to do. It doesn't really have any downsides. It's got good ammo, it's got good handling, it's got a good scope, it's got good damage. So this one pretty much does everything you want it to, and that is why we're going to put this one in the A tier. Next up, we have the Breaker, and again, this is another one. It's a good shotgun. It does everything you want it to. It's basically, when you're using this thing, you dump the mag into whatever it is, whatever enemy's right in front of you, and it's most likely gonna die. I don't think that there's many enemies that are going to survive a full mag dump from the breaker, as long as you're finding the spots where you can penetrate the armor. The only downside to this one is that you might find yourself reloading rather often with this one, but overall, just a good shotgun. Very good if you want something to keep enemies off of you. Next up, we have the crossbow, which we're going to go ahead and put into the C tier. This one is a fun weapon. However, as of right now, there's just not really anything it does that something else doesn't already do. I have heard that it is a good stealth weapon, so if you are maybe a solo player and you're looking to go on some stealth missions, you could try this one out and see if you aggro a few less enemies, or perhaps you aggro enemies from a smaller distance when you're shooting this. But anyway, moving on, we're going to move on to the Liberator, which is a good assault rifle. We're going to go ahead and put it in the A tier. This one, again, does what you want it to. It kills all the little stuff. It's got good ammo economy. It doesn't have bad recoil. It's got a good scope on it, good rate of fire, overall fitting into a decent role in the game. Next up, we have the Scorcher. This is a great weapon. We're going to go ahead and put this one in the S tier because it's just good at killing everything. You take this gun into the game and you're not really going to have a problem killing whatever it is that's in front of you. The only downside to this weapon is its ammo economy, as you might find yourself running out of ammo uh, a little bit more frequently than with other weapons. But overall, a great all-around weapon coming out of the free war bond as well. Next up, we have the Liberator Penetrator. This one we're going to go ahead and slot into the B tier because it just doesn't really. It needs a little extra oomph in order for it to fill a role that something else doesn't already fill. Whether that be increasing its ammo so that it can kill more over the course of its entire, all of its magazines, or probably the more popular answer is giving it more damage per shot, because as it stands right now, the damage per shot just really isn't cutting it. I think on Hive Guards, for example, it takes almost a whole mag, if not the whole mag, to kill one Hive Guard, which on Helldive missions just isn't really cutting it, which is why we're going to slot this one in the B tier. Next up, we have the Punisher shotgun, which is a good shotgun. It has very high stagger, very high damage. It is a little bit ineffective against, a large horde. When there's a lot of enemies swarming you, it can struggle a little bit, but with the ammo, because it only has 60 rounds, as well as the rate of fire. But overall, we're going to put this one in the A tier because this one does what you want it to. Next up, we got the Eruptor, otherwise known as the Support Weapon Primary. This one destroys fabricators and plugs the bug holes, which is its biggest pro as of right now, as well as being able to deal high damage to medium enemies and giving a little bit of AoE damage as well. We are going to be slotting this one into the B tier just because it again needs just like the Liberator Penetrator. I feel like it needs a little extra oomph after its most recent nerf to get it back into a spot where it fits a good role. Next up, we got the Defender SMG. We're going to be going and putting this one in A tier because this is just a good all-around weapon. It doesn't really have any downsides at all. The only small downside to it is the accuracy. When you're shooting something that's about 75 plus meters away, you're gonna be struggling just a little bit to hit the spots that you want, which can be a bit of a burden. And for example, on the bot side, it can struggle to hit those heads a little bit once you get to a little bit of a further range out there. Moving on, we got the Scythe next up, another one of my personal favorites. Not much to say other than it's a laser beam. It kills weak points super duper fast, but it does not deal that much. It doesn't feel like it deals as much damage to non-weak points, which can make it a bit of a burden sometimes. So as long as you're aiming well, it performs well. Next up, we have the Breaker Spray and Pray. And this one is a tough one because of a reason we'll get to in a minute. A couple of weapons down the line, we will get to why the Breaker Spray and Pray just doesn't really cut it. As of right now, we're going to go ahead and put it in the C tier, as the only upside to it really is that you don't really have to aim. You can literally just spray and pray with it, and you will kill stuff in front of you. But again, it doesn't really fit a role in the game right now. There isn't a specific niche for it where it shines. And again, we'll get to that here in a second. Moving on, we got the Diligence Counter Sniper. This is a great marksman rifle. Again, just like the Diligence, but in my opinion, better in every way. It's got good handling, good ammo, good damage, a great scope with higher zoom than the regular Diligence. So we're going to go ahead and put this one in S tier. Next up, we got the Liberator Concussive. This one is going to be going into the C tier, unfortunately. This gun does differ from the Pummeler, which I thought was going to be the same. However, it does not appear to be the same, where the Liberator Concussive actually staggers enemies, as opposed to the Pummeler. It seems like the Pummeler stuns enemies. I'm not sure why these are different, but as it stands right now, this is part of why this one's going into C tier, because the stagger doesn't really help that much, on top of having a very low rate of fire and low damage per bullet. So overall here, really the only use that I've found for this weapon is on bug missions. If I'm bringing, 2 or 3 sentries, this one can help keep those bugs off of the sentries. Moving on, we got the Dominator, and this is another great weapon. So we're going to be going ahead and putting this one in the S tier. This gun is great at killing anything, and it does it quickly as well. The only downside to this is the handling of the weapon, as it handles kind of like a boat, but that can be mostly adjusted to or mitigated, so not a super huge downside, leading this to be an S tier weapon. Next up, we have the Breaker Incendiary, and this one overshadows the Breaker Spray and Pray right now, as they're the same archetype of shotgun, meaning they had the same damage per bullet or pellet spread, the same ammo, same rate of fire, except the Breaker Incendiary has been getting a number of buffs that the Breaker Spray and Pray hasn't for some reason. And because of that, the Breaker Incendiary already does more damage per pellet than the Breaker Spray and Pray, but also the Breaker Incendiary catches enemies on fire, leading to just tons more damage, which is why the Breaker Spray and Pray is currently in the C tier, and why we are going to put the Breaker Incendiary in the S tier. Next up, we got the Slugger. This is a good slug shotgun. Again, doesn't really have any downsides. This weapon doesn't particularly have any specific upsides either, but if you want a good precision shotgun, this is the one for you. Next up, we got the Sickle. This is your infinite ammo assault rifle. Again, the only downside that I can think of, which is really minor, is its accuracy. It's not pinpoint accurate like you might want it to be in certain situations. Other than that, this weapon again has infinite ammo. It has a high amount of shots before it overheats, and it has good damage per bullet as well. So everything you're looking for in an assault rifle, this gun's got it, which is why we're gonna put this one in the S tier. Next, we got the Pummeler, the concussive SMG. This one does exactly what you want it to. It concusses enemies, and it is a submachine gun. Just like it has very similar stats to the Defender SMG, and so we're going to be putting this one in A tier. This one arguably could be an S tier because its stats are so close to the regular Defender. If you're running the regular Defender, you might as well run the concussive version, because it adds the stun effect while only losing 5 damage per shot, which isn't that big of a deal for most enemies. Next up, we got the Tenderizer. And this one we're going to go ahead and put in an A tier, because just like the Liberator, this one shares very similar stats as of this patch, and I believe it has roughly the same amount of damage despite the Tenderizer having more magazines. Sorry, I meant the two weapons, the Liberator and the Tenderizer, have same overall damage over all of their magazines, although the Tenderizer has more magazines than the Liberator. Next, we have the Blitzer, the electric shotgun. This thing kills anything that gets close to you, has a decent rate of fire after it got buffed. The only downside is that it only kills things when it wants to, and there are a few specific instances where the gun will decide not to fire. And until you kind of learn to get around what those are and how to get around them, the gun can be a bit moody. However, we're going to be putting this one in the A tier because it fits the role of being an electric shotgun, zapping everything in front of you. Next, we have the Adjudicator. This one's going to be going into the B tier. This one again is very, very comparable to the Liberator Penetrator. It just needs a little extra oomph in order for it to be a very good weapon. Unfortunately, the biggest downside of the Adjudicator is its ammo, as its handling, scope, damage per bullet are all very good. It suffers heavily in the ammo economy department, and it suffers so much that it is going in the B tier instead of the A tier. Still a good weapon though. And last but not least, we have the Punisher Plasma. This weapon is great, and because of that, it is going in the S tier. It has the AoE damage that you want. It does have a kind of weird projectile that takes a little bit of an adjustment when you first start using it. The only major downside of this weapon is that it does lack precision damage. So on the bot side, it can struggle a little bit when you have a ton of Devastators all around you, and you're trying to, when you might prefer a weapon to hit the head of a Devastator, this weapon unfortunately cannot. Despite that, this one is going in the S tier because of its all-around use, because of that AoE damage that it provides. And there we have it. That is the primary weapons tier list. I hope y'all enjoy. Let me know in the comments what you think of this tier list and maybe what your personal favorites are. I thank y'all for watching.